Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations Built on Sand. Drew Lawson stared at the framed photo on his desk. Him and Vanessa on their wedding day 6 years ago. Her smile, once the light of his world, now seemed like a mask concealing something sinister beneath. He ran his thumb over the glass, wondering when everything had begun to change. Drew had built his architecture firm from scratch in Boston, working 80-hour weeks while Vanessa pursued her pharmaceutical sales career. They'd met at Northwestern, Drew the focused architecture student who rarely partied, Vanessa the vivacious business major who pulled him out of his shell. Their courtship had been a whirlwind, passionate, intense, and Drew now realized, perhaps too rushed. Another late night? Vanessa asked from the doorway of his home office, her tone carrying an undercurrent of irritation. Drew looked up from the blueprints of the downtown restoration project that had consumed him for months. Just finishing some revisions. The client meeting tomorrow is crucial. Vanessa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. She wore the emerald silk blouse he'd bought her for her birthday, the one she'd claimed was not really her style, until recently. We barely see each other anymore, Drew. When was the last time we had dinner together? The irony wasn't lost on him. For weeks, Vanessa had been the one coming home late, citing work dinners and team-building events. Her pharmaceutical company, Unauthorized, had allegedly been reorganizing territories, requiring more meetings and client entertaining. "I've got the Harborfront project deadline next week," Drew replied. "After that, I promise things will calm down." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "That's what you said about the Wellington Hotel project last month." She stepped into the room, her perfume, different from her usual scent, filling the space. "I spoke with Trent today." Drew's jaw tightened at the mention of his former college roommate. Trent Palmer had introduced Drew to Vanessa at a fraternity party their junior year. While Drew had gone on to build a respected architectural practice, Trent had floated between corporate jobs, his family connections repeatedly saving him from the consequences of his mediocrity. "How is he?" Drew asked, not particularly interested. "He's been promoted to regional director at Ferris Pharmaceuticals. Their headquarters are in Denver." Vanessa perched on the edge of his desk. "He mentioned they're expanding their architecture department for a massive campus redesign." Drew raised an eyebrow. "Good for him." He asked if you'd consider relocating. "The position would be perfect for you, corporate design director. Triple your current income, Drew." The intensity in her eyes caught his attention. This wasn't casual conversation. This was something she'd been planning to discuss. "My firm is here, Vanessa. My clients, my team. You could start a division there. Think bigger, Drew. This is the opportunity you've been waiting for. We've been talking about a fresh start for years." They hadn't, not seriously, but Drew didn't point that out. "I'll think about it," he said instead, turning back to his blueprints. Vanessa touched his shoulder. "Trent's flying in next Thursday. He wants to meet with you personally." Drew looked up sharply. "You already told him I was interested?" "I told him you'd hear him out," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "What's the harm in listening?" That night, as Vanessa slept beside him, Drew stared at the ceiling. Something felt wrong. Vanessa had never shown much interest in his career trajectory before. She'd always been supportive but hands-off, focused on her own ambitions. Now suddenly, she was orchestrating meetings and pushing for a life-altering move. His phone buzzed with a text from Cal Donovan, his business partner and closest friend since architecture school. "Finished the Harborfront renderings. Something's off with the west elevation. Call me tomorrow." Cal was more than a business partner. He was family. When Drew's parents had died in a car accident during his sophomore year of college, Cal's family had taken him in. It was Cal who had loaned Drew the money to start their firm when banks wouldn't take a chance on them. Drew texted back, "We'll call." Vanessa pushing Denver move. Trent Palmer involved. Thoughts? Cal's response came seconds later. "Palmer the snake? Hard pass. Since when does V care about your career moves?" Since when, indeed. Chapter 2. The Seeds of Suspicion. The Harborfront project consumed Drew's days, but Vanessa's sudden fixation on Denver occupied his nights. She'd created a presentation complete with real estate listings, school districts, though they had no children, and cultural attractions. Each evening brought a new angle on why Denver would be perfect for them. "Trent says the outdoor lifestyle is incredible," She gushed over dinner. Hiking, skiing within an hour's drive. Remember how we used to talk about being more active? Drew studied his wife carefully. Her hair was freshly highlighted, her nails professionally manicured. Small luxuries she'd previously considered wasteful. She'd been working out more intensely too, her body more toned than it had been in years. Trent seems to be selling you pretty hard on this, Drew observed, keeping his tone neutral. Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. He's just being helpful. He knows what a talent you are. The day before Trent's arrival, Drew met Cal at their favorite diner for breakfast. They'd been coming to Rosie's since they'd opened their firm, plotting their professional futures over coffee and Rosie's famous banana pancakes. Tell me more about this Denver situation, Cal said, stirring his coffee. Drew shrugged. Apparently Trent's company is expanding their architecture division. Vanessa thinks it's perfect timing. Cal's eyes narrowed. And what does Vanessa get out of this move? Her career's here. According to her, Novaris has an office in Denver. She's already inquired about a transfer. Cal leaned forward. Drew, when was the last time you checked your bank statements? The question seemed out of left field. What do you mean? Humor me. Pull up your accounts. Drew frowned but opened his banking app. Everything looks normal. What? Now check your credit card statements for the past 3 months. Drew scrolled through his transactions, then stopped cold. There were charges from hotels in Boston, places he'd never visited. Expensive restaurants on nights when Vanessa had claimed to be working late. A jewelry store purchase from 2 weeks ago. I didn't buy any jewelry recently, Drew said quietly. Cal's expression softened. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this. Nancy saw Vanessa with Trent at Maison Laurent last month. They looked intimate. Nancy was Cal's wife of 15 years. She wasn't one for gossip or drama. That doesn't make sense. Trent lives in Denver. Drew's mind raced, trying to fit the pieces together. Apparently, he's been in Boston frequently over the past 6 months, setting up partnerships with local healthcare networks or something. The world seemed to tilt beneath Drew. The late nights, the new perfume, the sudden interest in Denver. It wasn't about his career opportunity at all. You think she's having an affair with Trent, Drew said flatly. Cal didn't answer directly. I think you need to go into this meeting tomorrow with your eyes open, and maybe do some digging. That night, after Vanessa had gone to bed, Drew sat in his dark office, laptop open to Vanessa's email. They'd always known each other's passwords. No secrets between them, they'd promised. He hadn't checked her email in years. The evidence was right there, hidden in plain sight. Emails between Vanessa and Trent going back 8 months. Plans for their rendezvous. Discussions about how to convince Drew to move to Denver. Once we're there, we can figure out next steps, Trent had written. It'll be easier when we're in the same city permanently. I'll make him think it's his dream job, Vanessa had replied. Drew trusts me completely. Drew closed the laptop, a cold fury building inside him. Yes, he had trusted her completely. That had been his mistake. Tomorrow, he would meet with Trent, but not as the naive husband they thought him to be. Chapter 3, The Architect of Destruction. The restaurant Vanessa had chosen for the meeting with Trent was Montmartre, one of Boston's most exclusive French establishments. Drew arrived 15 minutes early, immaculately dressed in his tailored navy suit, hair perfectly styled. Image was everything today. Trent Palmer arrived 5 minutes later, still the polished fraud Drew remembered from college. Trent's handshake was firm, his smile practiced, his eyes evaluating Drew for weaknesses. Drew Lawson. Looking good, man. Denver's mountain air will suit you. Trent clapped him on the shoulder like they were old friends. Trent, it's been a while. Vanessa arrived last, wearing a dress Drew had never seen before. Her eyes darted nervously between the two men, clearly searching for signs that Drew might know something. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. She kissed Drew's cheek, then gave Trent a smile that lingered too long. I ordered champagne, Trent announced. We're celebrating, right? Seems premature, Drew said coolly. The waiter arrived with the champagne, and Trent took control of pouring. To new beginnings and old friends, he toasted. Drew raised his glass, but didn't drink. Tell me about this position, Trent. It sounds almost too good to be true. For the next 40 minutes, Drew listened as Trent outlined the opportunity at Ferris Pharmaceuticals, a vague leadership role with ambitious projections and little substance. The salary Trent quoted was indeed impressive, but Drew noticed the careful avoidance of details about reporting structure, team size, or concrete projects. Sounds fascinating, Drew said when Trent finally finished. I'm particularly interested in the campus redesign you mentioned. Who's the current architect of record? Trent blinked, clearly not expecting technical questions. We're, in between firms at the moment. That's why we need someone like you to take charge. In between firms for $1 billion campus redesign? That's unusual. Vanessa kicked Drew under the table, her smile strained. Drew's always been detail-oriented. It's what makes him so good at what he does. Actually, Drew continued, ignoring her warning. I took the liberty of calling Ferris Pharmaceuticals this morning. Spoke with Diane Keller in HR. Interesting thing, she's never heard of a corporate design director position. In fact, she was quite surprised to hear they were expanding their architecture department at all, since they outsource all their design work to SLM. The color drained from Trent's face. Vanessa's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. There must be some confusion, Trent stammered. The position is still being created. It's not public knowledge yet. Curious, because when I mentioned your name, Diane seemed confused about that too. Said you're not actually the regional director of Ferris. You're a mid-level sales rep who's being transferred to their Denver office next month. Lateral move, not a promotion. Vanessa's eyes widened in shock as she turned to Trent. You said you were the regional director. Trent's facade cracked. I'm being groomed for the position. It's complicated. Not as complicated as explaining to your wife why you've been in Boston so frequently this past year, Drew said, his voice deadly calm as he turned to Vanessa. Or explaining to your husband why you've been meeting your college boyfriend at Hotel Commonwealth on Tuesday afternoons. The silence that descended over the table was absolute. Vanessa's face had gone ghost white. Drew, I can explain, she began. I'm sure you can, Drew interrupted. You've both been very creative with your explanations. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Enjoy your lunch. Consider the champagne my parting gift. As he walked away, he heard Vanessa call his name, her voice tinged with panic. He didn't turn around. Instead, he nodded to the maitre d' on his way out, slipping him a $100 bill. The couple at table 12 will be receiving their bill shortly. Please make sure it includes everything they order. No matter what they say, I will not be covering it. Outside, Drew took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. Phase 1 complete. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. It's Drew Lawson. We need to talk about Trent Palmer and his future at Ferris Pharmaceuticals. I have information their board will find very interesting. Chapter 4, The Gathering Storm. Drew moved out that evening, taking only what he needed for a few days. He checked into a boutique hotel downtown, then shut off his phone as Vanessa's calls and messages flooded in. 63 missed calls in the first 4 hours. Desperation had set in quickly. He'd expected anger from her, perhaps defiance, but not this frantic pursuit. It told him she hadn't developed an exit strategy. She and Trent had been so confident in their manipulation that they hadn't prepared for failure. In his hotel room, Drew spread out his research on the desk. After discovering the affair, he'd spent nights investigating Trent's position at Ferris Pharmaceuticals. The call to HR had confirmed his suspicions, but he'd learned much more. Trent wasn't being transferred to Denver by chance. He'd requested the move months ago, setting their plan in motion. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Cal stood in the hallway, holding a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. Figured you could use this, Cal said, stepping inside. Nancy's worried about you. Drew managed a grim smile. I'm fine. The hell you are. Cal poured them each 2 fingers of bourbon. But you will be. What's your next move? Drew took the glass. I'm meeting with Leonard Ross tomorrow. Cal's eyebrows shot up. The pharmaceutical headhunter? Bold move. Trent's not the only one with industry connections. Drew sipped his drink. Leonard and I designed his lake house last year. He owes me a favor. The next morning, Drew met Leonard at his office overlooking the public garden. Leonard Ross had built his executive search firm into the premier recruitment agency for pharmaceutical executives. His client list included every major player in the industry, including Ferris Pharmaceuticals. Drew, pleasure to see you again, Leonard greeted him warmly. Though I'm surprised by your request. You're looking to pivot into pharma architecture. Drew smiled. Not exactly. I need information about Trent Palmer at Ferris Pharmaceuticals. Leonard's professional smile dimmed. You know I can't discuss candidates or placements. Even ones who are sleeping with my wife and trying to manipulate me into relocating across the country under false pretenses? Leonard's expression shifted from professional reserve to genuine concern. Oh, I see. He studied Drew for a moment. That does change things. What do you want to know? Everything. His position, performance, his transfer to Denver. Leonard tapped his fingers on his desk. Off the record, Palmer's a mediocre performer who's been skating by on family connections. His uncle sits on Ferris's board. He requested the Denver transfer himself, citing family reasons. It's not a promotion. If anything, it's a lateral move to a less prestigious territory. And his future prospects? Leonard shrugged. Limited. He's not respected internally. The only reason he hasn't been let go is the family connection. He paused. What are you planning, Drew? I'm considering a career change myself, Drew replied with a cold smile. Tell me, who's the rival that Ferris fears most in the Denver market? Leonard's eyes narrowed. That would be Meridian Pharmaceuticals. They've been aggressively expanding, poaching Ferris's best talents. Does Meridian have any executive openings at the moment? Leonard leaned back. As a matter of fact, they're looking for a new VP of business development. Someone who understands the competition and can help them target key accounts. Someone like a former Ferris sales rep with insider knowledge? Theoretically, Leonard studied Drew carefully. But Palmer doesn't have the qualifications or talent for such a role. Meridian doesn't need to know that yet, Drew said. All they need to know is that he has access to Ferris's client list and strategic plans. Leonard's expression was a mixture of admiration and concern. This is playing with fire, Drew. Sometimes a controlled burn is necessary to clear out the undergrowth. Drew leaned forward. I need you to arrange an interview for Trent with Meridian. Make it seem like they headhunted him. Stroke his ego. And make sure the compensation package is too good to refuse. And what's your endgame here? Drew's smile didn't reach his eyes. Architectural reconfiguration. Some structures need to be dismantled before rebuilding can begin. As Drew left Leonard's office, his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. It's Margot from Cal's office. He asked me to tell you that Vanessa came by looking for you. She seemed desperate. Also, there's a Detective Reyna looking for you regarding the Palmer situation. Detective Reyna. That was unexpected. Drew made a mental note to call his attorney, Patricia Wells. Whatever Vanessa and Trent were planning, he needed to be prepared. Meanwhile, in the background of his strategy for Trent, Drew had set another plan in motion. His application for a temporary position with Miyamoto Architecture in Tokyo had been accepted. His flight was booked for next week, one way. The Lawson and Donovan partnership agreement had contingencies for temporary absences. Cal would manage their Boston projects while Drew worked remotely. Drew's phone buzzed again. This time it was Cal. Just got a call from Vanessa. She's threatening to file a missing person report if you don't contact her in 24 hours. Also, Palmer called the office looking for you. Sounded scared. Drew smiled. Good. They should be scared. The game was just beginning. Chapter 5, Pressure Points. Vanessa's attempts to reach Drew grew increasingly frantic. By day 3, she'd called 125 times, left 47 voicemails, and sent over 200 text messages. Drew read and listened to them all, cataloging her progression from anger to bargaining to desperate pleading. You're overreacting. It was just a stupid mistake. We need to talk about this like adults. Come home. Please, Drew. I'll do anything. I'll end it with Trent. It meant nothing. Where are you? People are starting to ask questions. This is humiliating. I spoke with a lawyer today. If you don't respond, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. The last message made Drew laugh out loud. She was in no position to make legal threats, and they both knew it. Massachusetts was an equitable distribution state, but their prenuptial agreement was ironclad. In case of infidelity, Vanessa would walk away with only what she had brought into the marriage, which wasn't much. Drew finally called his attorney, Patricia Wells, a family law specialist known for her ruthless efficiency. Drew, I've been expecting your call, Patricia said when he reached her. Your wife has been quite persistent in trying to locate you through my office. I imagine she has. Has she mentioned why we're estranged? Oddly, no. She claims she's worried about your mental state, and that you're acting irrationally. She's even suggested you might be having a breakdown due to work stress. Drew wasn't surprised. Classic deflection. Has she filed any legal paperwork? Not yet, but she's consulted with Harmon Little. Drew grimaced. Harmon Little was known for representing spouses seeking maximum financial settlements. Interesting choice for someone with a prenup that specifically addresses infidelity. Indeed, Patricia agreed. I've taken the liberty of preparing counterfilings should she proceed. However, I'm more concerned about this Detective Reyna who's been asking questions. Care to fill me in? Drew frowned. That's what I was going to ask you about. I have no idea who Detective Reyna is or what they want. There was a pause on the line. According to my contact at BPD, a Detective Sophia Reyna is investigating allegations of corporate espionage involving Trent Palmer. Your name has come up in the investigation. Drew's mind raced. Corporate espionage? That was unexpected and potentially useful. I should meet with her, Drew decided. Set it up for tomorrow. Are you sure that's wise without knowing more details? Trust me, Patricia. This might be exactly what I need. The next day, Drew met Detective Reyna at Patricia's office. Sophia Reyna was sharp-eyed and direct, with none of the artificial politeness Drew had expected. Mr. Lawson, thank you for coming in voluntarily, she began. I understand you've been unavailable recently. I've been working, Drew replied smoothly. What's this about corporate espionage? Detective Reyna opened a folder. Ferris Pharmaceuticals has filed a complaint against Trent Palmer, alleging he's been accessing confidential client information beyond his authorization. They became suspicious when Meridian Pharmaceuticals suddenly began making offers to several of their key accounts Mr. Palmer had access to. Drew maintained a neutral expression. That sounds concerning, but what does it have to do with me? Mr. Palmer claims you set him up, that you orchestrated a job offer from Meridian to lure him into leaving Ferris, knowing he'd be accused of taking proprietary information. Drew allowed himself a small smile. Detective, I'm an architect, not a pharmaceutical executive. How exactly would I orchestrate such a complex scheme? That's what I'm trying to determine. She studied him carefully. Your wife told us you've been acting erratically since discovering her relationship with Mr. Palmer. Did she mention that she and Palmer were planning to manipulate me into relocating to Denver under false pretenses? Drew countered. Or that Palmer lied about his position at Ferris to facilitate this deception? Detective Reyna's expression revealed nothing. Those details weren't mentioned, no. I imagine there are many details my wife and Mr. Palmer have conveniently omitted. Drew leaned forward. Detective, I didn't orchestrate anything illegal. If Palmer accessed files he shouldn't have in his eagerness to impress a potential employer, that's on him. And his claim that you arranged the Meridian interview. Drew shrugged. The pharmaceutical industry is small. I designed a vacation home for a prominent headhunter. Perhaps I mentioned Palmer was looking for new opportunities. Is networking a crime now? After the detective left, Patricia fixed Drew with a penetrating stare. You're playing a dangerous game. Corporate espionage carries serious penalties. I didn't ask Palmer to steal anything, Drew said truthfully. If he chose to bring confidential information to his Meridian interview to make himself look valuable, that was his decision. Patricia's expression remained skeptical. Just be careful. Your revenge won't be satisfying from a jail cell. Drew nodded, but internally, he was pleased. Things were proceeding even better than he'd anticipated. Palmer had panicked, exactly as Drew had hoped. Now to accelerate the next phase. He made 2 calls after leaving Patricia's office. The first was to Leonard Ross. How quickly can you arrange an interview for me with Meridian CEO? Leonard sounded wary. What are you planning now? A controlled demolition. Trust me, you'll want plausible deniability. Just set up the meeting. His second call was to Martin Green, CEO of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Mr. Green? Drew Lawson. We haven't met, but we have a mutual problem named Trent Palmer. I believe we should discuss this situation privately. Chapter 6. The Dominoes Fall. Martin Green agreed to meet Drew for breakfast at the Four Seasons, away from corporate eyes. The CEO was older than Drew had expected, with shrewd eyes that assessed everything. I don't normally meet with strangers who call claiming to have solutions to problems I didn't know I had, Green said after they'd ordered. But the Palmer situation has become complicated. I imagine it has, Drew replied. Especially since he's been feeding you Ferris client information that's now being tracked back to your company. Green's expression hardened. We did not solicit any confidential information. Of course not. But Palmer offered it anyway, didn't he? Eager to prove his value. Green didn't confirm or deny this. What's your interest in this matter, Mr. Lawson? You're not in pharmaceuticals. Let's just say Palmer and I have personal history. He's been involved with my wife, while simultaneously trying to manipulate my career for his benefit. Understanding dawned in Green's eyes. This is about revenge. This is about justice, Drew corrected. And offering you a solution that benefits us both. I'm listening. Ferris is building a case against Palmer for corporate espionage. They'll likely include Meridian in the lawsuit, claiming you incentivized him to steal proprietary information. Green frowned. We've already terminated Palmer's candidacy. Too late. The damage is done. Drew leaned forward. Unless you have someone who can testify that Palmer offered the information unsolicited, and that Meridian immediately recognized it as confidential and rejected it. Someone like you? Green asked skeptically. Someone exactly like me. I was there when Palmer approached Meridian. I witnessed him offering confidential Ferris information. And I have the text messages where I warned him against sharing such information. Of course, Drew had been nowhere near Palmer's Meridian interview, and there were no such text messages. But Palmer didn't know that. Green's eyes narrowed. That's quite convenient. It could be, Drew agreed. For a price. And what price would that be? Transfer Palmer to your Singapore office immediately. A lateral move, not a promotion. Make it clear he has no choice if he wants to avoid legal action. Green studied Drew for a long moment. That's your revenge? Sending him to Singapore? Drew smiled. That's step one. And step two? Not your concern. Drew stood. Call your legal team. Tell them I'm willing to provide a sworn statement clearing Meridian of wrongdoing in exchange for Palmer's immediate transfer. They'll recognize the value. 3 days later, Palmer received the news. Transfer to Singapore or face criminal charges for corporate espionage. Drew knew this because Vanessa called him in a panic. What have you done? She demanded when he finally answered. Trent's being sent to Singapore. Singapore, Drew. Was destroying our marriage not enough? Drew's voice was ice. Our marriage was destroyed the moment you decided to lie and manipulate me. It wasn't like that. I wanted us to have a fresh start. Denver seemed perfect. Perfect for continuing your affair, you mean? Vanessa's tone changed, becoming conciliatory. Please, Drew. We can work through this. I've ended things with Trent. I've told him I won't be going to Denver or anywhere else with him. How noble of you, now that he's headed to Singapore. This isn't funny. My life is falling apart. I could lose my job over this scandal. Drew felt no sympathy. You should have considered the consequences before you decided to betray me. What do you want from me? Vanessa was crying now. Tell me what I can do to fix this. Nothing. There's nothing you can do. Drew paused. But if you're serious about making amends, you can start by telling me exactly when the affair began and how long you've been planning the Denver move. Vanessa hesitated. Does it matter now? It matters to me. Through tears, Vanessa confessed. The affair had begun 10 months ago, when Trent had returned to Boston for a conference. They'd reconnected at an industry event, exchanged numbers, and things had escalated quickly. The Denver plan had been Trent's idea initially, a way for them to be together without raising suspicions. I never meant to hurt you, she insisted. I was going to end it once we moved. It was just exciting. Different. Different from your boring architect husband, Drew supplied. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Drew's voice was cold. Pack whatever you need for the next few weeks. I'm coming home tomorrow. I don't want to see you there. You're throwing me out? You can't do that. It's my house too. Check the deed, Vanessa. The house is in my name only. Your idea, if you recall, to protect it from any business liabilities I might incur. Another of Vanessa's manipulations that had backfired on her. She'd insisted they keep the house in Drew's name only, claiming it was for asset protection. In reality, Drew now realized, it had been to ensure she could walk away cleanly when the time came. Where am I supposed to go? Vanessa demanded. That's not my problem anymore. Drew hung up, then booked his flight to Tokyo for the following week. The next morning, Drew returned to find the house empty, as instructed. Vanessa had taken her clothes and personal items, but nothing else. Good. That would make things simpler. He spent the day removing every trace of Vanessa from the home. Photos were taken down, mementos boxed up, her remaining belongings packed for storage. By evening, it was as if she had never lived there. His phone buzzed with a text from Cal. Palmer's transfer to Singapore is official. He leaves next week. And Vanessa's been calling the office nonstop looking for you. She sounds desperate. Drew smiled grimly. Perfect. Phase 1 complete. I'm flying to Tokyo on Tuesday. Everything set on your end? All arranged. The firm is yours when you're ready to return. Just say the word. Drew looked around the empty house. Soon, it would be on the market. His life in Boston would be neatly wound down, ready to be packed away. The Tokyo position would give him time and distance, time to plan the next phase of his revenge, and distance to execute it without interference. Vanessa and Palmer thought this was over. They had no idea what was coming next. Chapter 7. The Vanishing Act. Tokyo embraced Drew with its organized chaos and respectful anonymity. The Miyamoto architecture firm welcomed his expertise, and his temporary position quickly became a valued senior role. Drew immersed himself in Japanese architectural philosophy, finding solace in its emphasis on balance and harmony, concepts his personal life had lacked. 3 months passed with minimal contact with Boston. Cal managed their firm admirably, sending weekly updates that Drew acknowledged with brief responses. Patricia handled the divorce proceedings, reporting that Vanessa had finally accepted the prenuptial terms after her attempts to contest it failed. The house sold for well above asking price. The proceeds safely transferred to Drew's accounts. As for Vanessa, Drew heard through Cal that she'd been struggling. Novaris had transferred her to their Chicago office, a demotion disguised as a lateral move. The scandal of the Palmer situation had tainted her professional reputation. She'd reached out to Drew several times through Patricia, seeking reconciliation or at least conversation. Drew had ignored every attempt. Trent Palmer's situation in Singapore had deteriorated rapidly. Drew's anonymous tip to Ferris Pharmaceuticals about Palmer's ongoing communications with Meridian had resulted in a corporate investigation. While he'd avoided criminal charges thanks to Meridian's intervention, Palmer's career was effectively over in the pharmaceutical industry. His family connections could only shield him from so much. Drew maintained meticulous digital surveillance on both Vanessa and Palmer through a private investigator. He tracked their communications, movements, and desperate attempts to salvage their careers and reputations. The information provided a cold satisfaction, but wasn't enough. Not yet. 6 months into his Tokyo assignment, Drew received a call from Patricia. "The divorce is final," she informed him. "Congratulations, you're a free man." Drew felt nothing at the news, neither relief nor sadness. "Thank you for handling everything. There is one matter we should discuss," Patricia continued. "Vanessa is claiming you've been harassing her employer and interfering with her career prospects. She's threatened to file for a restraining order." Drew smiled. He'd made no direct contact with Novaris, but he had ensured that Vanessa's role in the Palmer scandal was well known within industry circles. It wasn't harassment, it was simply making sure the truth was available to those who needed to know. Let her file whatever she wants. There's no evidence of harassment because there hasn't been any. That's what I told her attorney. Patricia paused. "Drew, I've represented many clients through difficult divorces. Most find some closure after the papers are signed. You don't seem to be looking for closure." "I'm not," Drew admitted. "This was never about ending a marriage. It's about consequences." After hanging up, Drew examined the latest report from his investigator. Palmer had been terminated from Meridian's Singapore office. His finances were in shambles, his reputation destroyed. He'd booked a flight back to the U.S., to Chicago, specifically, where Vanessa now lived. Drew smiled. They were planning to reconnect, to rebuild their lives together from the wreckage he'd created. How predictable. It was time for the next phase. Drew called Martin Green at Meridian. Their arrangement had benefited them both. Drew's testimony had helped Meridian avoid a costly lawsuit, and Green owed him. "Mr. Green, Drew Lawson. I believe it's time to call in that favor." 3 days later, Drew landed in Chicago. He checked into the Four Seasons under an assumed name and set his plan in motion. First, he contacted Novaris's Chicago regional director, Malcolm Foster, an old client from his Boston days. "Malcolm, I need 15 minutes of your time. It concerns one of your employees, Vanessa Lawson." Malcolm agreed to meet, his curiosity piqued. Over coffee in the hotel lobby, Drew laid out a carefully constructed story. He discovered Vanessa and Palmer had been selling proprietary Novaris information to competitors during their affair. He had evidence, fabricated but convincing, suggesting Vanessa had accessed confidential files beyond her authorization. "I'm not looking to cause trouble," Drew assured Malcolm. "I just thought you should be aware of the potential liability. Given the Palmer precedent, I'd hate to see Novaris caught unprepared." Malcolm's face had grown increasingly grave during Drew's explanation. "This is extremely serious, Drew. If what you're suggesting is true, I understand your position. I'm simply fulfilling what I see as a professional obligation to warn you." Drew slid a folder across the table. These documents might help your security team investigate appropriately. As Drew expected, Malcolm immediately escalated the situation to Novaris's legal department. By that evening, Vanessa had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Her company phone and laptop were confiscated, her access to Novaris systems revoked. Drew watched from a distance as Vanessa left the Novaris offices, clearly distraught. She made a series of frantic calls, to her lawyer, to her parents, and finally to Palmer, who had arrived in Chicago that morning. Drew's investigator confirmed they met at a bar near Palmer's hotel, both looking shell-shocked. Through the surveillance photos, Drew could see the desperation in their expressions, the panic as their already fragile new start crumbled before it had even begun. The next morning, Drew made his final move. He called Palmer directly. "Hello, Trent. It's been a while." The silence on the other end was telling. Finally, Palmer managed. "Drew, how did you get this number? That's not important. What matters is that I'm in Chicago, and we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," Palmer said, his voice strained. "You've done enough damage." Interesting perspective from the man who slept with my wife and tried to manipulate my career for his convenience. Drew's tone remained calm. "But you're right. I have done damage. To your career, your reputation, your future prospects. And I'm just getting started. What do you want?" Palmer demanded. "Money? An apology? What will it take to end this?" "Meet me at the Adler Planetarium in 1 hour. Come alone. Or don't come at all, but understand that what happens to Vanessa next will be the consequence of your choice." Drew hung up and made his way to the planetarium, selecting a bench overlooking Lake Michigan. The November wind was bitter, but he barely noticed it. His focus was absolute. Palmer arrived 17 minutes late, looking haggard and nervous. He approached Drew's bench hesitantly, as if expecting a trap. "Sit down, Trent," Drew instructed. "Enjoy the view. It might be the last pleasant moment you have for quite some time." Palmer sat, maintaining as much distance as the bench allowed. "Say what you need to say. I have nothing to lose anymore." "That's where you're wrong," Drew replied. "You still have your freedom. That's quite valuable, especially considering the evidence of corporate espionage I've compiled against you. You've already destroyed my career. What more could you possibly want?" Drew turned to face him directly. "I want you to disappear from Vanessa's life. Permanently. No contact, no communication, nothing. You get on a plane today and never speak to her again." Palmer laughed bitterly. "After everything you've done, you're still worried about her being with me? She's all I have left, Drew. We're both starting over." "No, you're not." Drew's voice was steel. "You're finished, Trent. The only question is whether you end up in prison or merely unemployed and disgraced." Drew removed an envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to Palmer. "Inside are 2 things. A one-way ticket to Seattle departing in 4 hours, and a USB drive containing evidence that would interest the FBI's white-collar crime division." Palmer stared at the envelope. "This is extortion. This is mercy," Drew corrected. "More than you deserve. You have one chance to walk away from this with some semblance of a future. Take the ticket. Start over somewhere far from Vanessa and far from me. And if I refuse?" Drew stood. "Then I make a call, and by tomorrow morning, federal agents will be questioning you about data theft across state lines. That's a federal offense with significant prison time." The color drained from Palmer's face. "You would really go that far? Over an affair?" "It was never about the affair, Trent. It was about the betrayal, the manipulation, the arrogance of thinking you could use me as a pawn in your pathetic games." Drew checked his watch. "You have 3 hours and 42 minutes to decide. Choose wisely." As Drew walked away, he felt Palmer's eyes boring into his back. He knew what choice Palmer would make. Men like him always chose self-preservation. 3 hours later, his investigator confirmed that Palmer had checked out of his hotel and was headed to O'Hare. Drew allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. One loose and tied up. One more to go. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Vanessa stood in the lobby of Drew's hotel, her composed exterior betraying only hints of the turmoil within. She'd received his message, a simple text with a time and place, and had arrived exactly on schedule, always punctual when it suited her needs. Drew watched her from the mezzanine level before descending to meet her. She looked thinner than he remembered, the stress of recent months evident despite her careful makeup and expensive clothes. "Thank you for coming," Drew said as he approached. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly at his appearance. Tokyo had changed him. He was leaner, more poised, his tailored Japanese suit cutting a sharp figure. "You didn't give me much choice," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. "Not after what happened at Novaris." Drew gestured toward the hotel restaurant. "Shall we?" They were seated in a private corner booth, invisible to casual observers, but with a clear view of the exits, a setting Drew had deliberately chosen. After ordering drinks, they sat in waited silence until Vanessa finally spoke. "Trent's gone," she said flatly. "He left yesterday without even saying goodbye. Just a text saying he was taking a job in Seattle, and it was over between us." Drew sipped his whiskey. "How disappointing for you. Don't pretend you had nothing to do with it." Her facade cracked slightly, revealing the anger beneath. "This is all you're doing, isn't it? The Novaris investigation, Trent's sudden departure. It's all you. Does it matter? Of course it matters. You've systematically destroyed my life, Drew. My career, my relationship, my reputation, everything." Drew set his glass down carefully. "An interesting perspective from the woman who was planning to use our marriage as a convenient cover while she relocated to be with her lover." Vanessa flinched. "It wasn't like that. Not entirely." "Then tell me what it was like, Vanessa. Explain to me how your betrayal was somehow justified." She looked away. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I've admitted that. I've apologized. What more do you want from me?" "The truth," Drew said simply. "No more manipulation, no more convenient narratives. Just the truth." Vanessa's shoulders sagged, her carefully maintained posture collapsing. "The truth? The truth is I was bored, Drew. We built this perfect life that looked good on paper, successful careers, beautiful home, respected in our circles. But somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other. You were always working, always focused on the next project, the next client. So your solution was to cheat rather than communicate? I tried to communicate. You never listened." "Not really." She took a shaky breath. "Trent made me feel seen again. It was selfish and wrong, but it felt like waking up after being asleep for years." Drew studied her face, searching for sincerity. "And the Denver plan? That was Trent's idea initially. He knew about the transfer months before it happened. He suggested I convince you to relocate, said it would be a fresh start for us. I convinced myself it could work, that maybe a new city would help us reconnect. While you continued your affair." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what I was thinking. It made sense at the time, in a twisted way. I wasn't ready to leave you, but I couldn't let go of Trent either. So you chose to have both, regardless of the cost to me." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Yes, and I've lost everything because of it." Drew felt nothing, no satisfaction in her pain, no vindication in her tears. Just emptiness where his anger had burned so hot for months. "The Novaris investigation will be dropped," he said finally. "There's no evidence because there was no crime. I've already spoken with Malcolm." Vanessa looked up, confusion in her eyes. "You're calling it off? Why?" "Because it's served its purpose." Drew finished his drink. "Just as this conversation has served its purpose." "Which is what exactly? To see me suffer? To make sure I know you're the one pulling the strings? To see if there was anything left to salvage." Drew met her gaze. "There isn't." Vanessa's expression hardened. "So that's it. You fly in from Tokyo, summon me like a disobedient child, decide I'm not worth saving, and disappear again." "Essentially, yes. You've changed, Drew. The man I married would never have been this calculating, this cold." Drew smiled without humor. "The man you married no longer exists. You and Trent made sure of that." He signaled for the check, then placed a manila envelope on the table. "Divorce papers. Already signed. The settlement is exactly as outlined in the prenup. Your attorney has reviewed them." Vanessa stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. "What happens now? You rebuild your life. Without Trent, without me, without the safety nets you've always relied on." Drew stood. "Consider it an opportunity for growth." "And you?" "Back to Tokyo." Drew buttoned his suit jacket. "For now, I've discovered I have a talent for reinvention." As he turned to leave, Vanessa called after him. "Was any of it real, Drew? Did you ever love me at all?" Drew paused, considering the question. "I loved who I thought you were. That person never existed." He left her sitting alone in the restaurant, the untouched envelope between them like a final verdict. Outside in the cold Chicago air, Drew felt a strange lightness. The meticulously crafted revenge he'd executed over the past 9 months had achieved its objectives. Vanessa and Palmer had faced consequences for their betrayal. They would never again have the lives they'd planned together. Yet the victory felt hollow. The man who had begun this journey, the betrayed husband burning with righteous fury, was gone, transformed by his own machinations into someone colder and more calculating. Drew pulled out his phone and called Cal. "It's done," he said simply. "Are you okay?" Cal asked, concern evident in his voice. "I'm fine. Better than fine." Drew gazed up at the Chicago skyline. "I'm thinking of selling my stake in the firm." There was a pause. "That's unexpected. What would you do instead?" "Miyamoto has offered me a partnership. They're expanding their international division, looking to establish offices in Singapore, London, Dubai." "Sounds like an amazing opportunity," Cal said carefully. "But is this about the opportunity, or about putting as much distance as possible between you and Boston?" Drew considered the question. "Both. Maybe it's time to build something new, something entirely my own." "Whatever you decide, I'm behind you 100%, Cal promised. "Just don't disappear on me, okay? Nancy would never forgive me if I lost track of her favorite architect." Drew smiled, feeling the first genuine warmth he'd experienced in months. "I won't disappear. Just relocate strategically." After hanging up, Drew walked through Millennium Park, watching families ice skating on the ribbon, tourists taking photos at Cloud Gate. Normal people living normal lives, untouched by the kind of betrayal and vengeance that had consumed his existence. His phone buzzed with a text from his investigator. V left restaurant. Returned to apartment. No contact with P, who boarded flight to Seattle as scheduled. Drew typed back. Contract complete. Final payment transferred. Delete all records. It was over. Truly over. Vanessa would recover eventually. She was nothing if not resilient. Palmer would fade into obscurity in Seattle, probably finding another woman to manipulate for his benefit. They would both carry the scars of Drew's retribution, just as Drew would always carry the scars of their betrayal. But unlike them, Drew was emerging stronger, with new possibilities stretching before him. The pain they had inflicted had forged him into someone more formidable, more deliberate. Someone who would never again be vulnerable to manipulation or betrayal. As the snow began to fall, Drew turned toward his hotel, already mentally planning his return to Tokyo and the future beyond. He had architectures to design, both professional and personal. And this time, he would build on foundations no one could shake. Chapter 9, Foundations. 3 years later, the Dubai skyline glittered against the night, a testament to human ambition and architectural daring. Drew stood on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the city he'd helped reshape over the past 2 years. Miyamoto Lawson International had quickly established itself as a premier architectural firm specializing in sustainable luxury developments across Asia and the Middle East. Drew's vision had found fertile ground here, where clients valued innovation and were willing to pay for excellence. His phone buzzed with a message from Naomi Chun, his executive assistant and right hand for the past 18 months. The Tokyo team approved the final renderings for the Osaka project. Berlin office reports the Mueller contract is signed. Your 8 a.m. with Sheikh Abdullah is confirmed. Drew smiled. Everything proceeding exactly as planned, each element falling precisely into place, just as he'd designed it. His new life bore little resemblance to his old one. The lessons learned from Vanessa's betrayal had reshaped his approach to everything. Business, relationships, trust. He maintained a tight circle of proven loyal associates, scrutinized every relationship for hidden agendas, and never allowed anyone to have leverage over him again. Cal had sold his share of their Boston firm and joined Drew in Dubai 6 months ago, bringing his expertise in historic preservation to complement Drew's modernist sensibilities. Nancy had adapted surprisingly well to expat life, establishing an interior design consultancy that often collaborated with Miyamoto Lawson. Drew's phone buzzed again. This time it was Patricia Wells. "Thought you should know, Vanessa Lawrence, née Wilcox, formerly Lawson, filed for divorce from Richard Lawrence yesterday. Her third marriage in as many years. Still searching for stability, it seems." Drew felt nothing at the news, no satisfaction, no pity, not even curiosity. Vanessa had become a footnote in his history, noteworthy only as the catalyst for his transformation. He'd heard through industry channels that she'd left the pharmaceutical world entirely after Novartis, reinventing herself as a luxury real estate agent in Miami. Her natural charm and networking skills had served her well there. though her personal life remained turbulent. As for Trent Palmer, he disappeared into obscurity. The last Drew had heard, Palmer was working for a small regional distributor in the Pacific Northwest, his ambitions curtailed by his tarnished reputation. Drew's revenge had been complete, if not entirely satisfying. The cold calculation that had driven him through those months of strategic destruction had transformed into something else. A ruthless precision he now applied to building rather than dismantling. His intercom chimed. "Mr. Lawson, your dinner guests have arrived," his housekeeper announced. Drew checked his watch. 8 o'clock exactly. Cal and Nancy were nothing if not punctual. The dinner was a celebratory one. Miyamoto Lawson had just secured the contract for the new Singapore Arts Center, beating out firms 3 times their size. It was their most prestigious project to date, a validation of everything Drew had built since walking away from Boston. To new beginnings that are actually new. Cal toasted, raising his glass. It was an inside joke between them now, a reference to Vanessa's manipulative, fresh start in Denver that had started everything, and to foundations built on solid ground. Drew added, clinking his glass against Cal's. After dinner, as Nancy and Cal prepared to leave, Cal pulled Drew aside. "I ran into someone from Boston last week at the sustainability conference," he said casually. "Martin Reynolds, you remember him? He mentioned Vanessa's back in Boston, working for that luxury development company that's trying to revitalize the waterfront." Drew raised an eyebrow. "Is there a reason you're telling me this?" Cal shrugged. "Just thought you should know she might be circling back into our professional orbit. The development company has been reaching out to international firms for the project." "Let them reach out," Drew said coolly. "We're selective about our clients these days." Cal studied his friend carefully. "You really don't care anymore, do you? About Vanessa?" "No. She made her choices. I made mine." Drew gazed out at the Dubai skyline. "I prefer my view from here." After Cal and Nancy left, Drew returned to the balcony, nursing a glass of whiskey. His mind drifted not to the past, but to the future. The Singapore project, the potential expansion into South America, the legacy he was building brick by calculated brick. The betrayal that had once consumed him had ultimately freed him. In destroying the life that Vanessa and Trent had tried to manipulate, he discovered a strength and clarity of purpose he might never have found otherwise. His phone vibrated with an email alert, a proposal from the Boston Waterfront Development Company Cal had mentioned. Vanessa's name was there in the contact information, alongside her new title, Director of International Partnerships. Drew smiled coldly. How typical of her to assume the connection to him would be an advantage rather than a liability. Some people never learned. He deleted the email without responding and turned his attention to the Osaka project renderings. The past was finished. The future, his future, was rising before him, gleaming and purposeful, built on a foundation strong enough to withstand any storm. In the reflection of the glass door, Drew caught sight of himself. Confident, composed, completely in control. The architect had been remade by his own design, stronger and more unyielding than before. The man Vanessa had betrayed no longer existed. In his place stood someone who would never again be vulnerable to manipulation or deception. Someone who designed not just buildings, but destinies, including his own. Drew raised his glass in a silent toast to that transformation. The calculated return had become an unexpectedly perfect departure, and he wouldn't have it any other way. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.